a father's skin begins to split open. Not from the searing heat of a fire and not from the strike of a blade, but from something slithering, pushing, and tearing its way out from beneath his flesh. When Suzana broke through the bathroom door, she found her father convulsing on the floor, gasping for air as water poured over his trembling body. But the water wasn't helping. His skin was cracking, peeling back like the dry, brittle bark of a dead tree, and then something moved underneath. This was the work of a monster who ruled her village with an iron fist and dark magic. But what Suzana didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known until it was far too late, was that her quest for vengeance would demand an unthinkable, devastating price. Because the monster she was hunting to avenge her family was the exact same monster who had fathered the only man she had ever loved. How do you kill a curse without destroying the only person you care about? To understand how this nightmare began, we have to rewind to the dark, suffocating heart of a rural village, completely enslaved by a man named Bishman. Bishman wasn't just a man, he was a walking shadow. He obtained his power not through fairness or elections, but through a terrifying trip to a dark sorcerer named Saman. Bishman had asked Saman to place a death hex on the sitting village chief. He didn't care about the heavy, damning sin he was carrying on his soul. He just wanted power. The ritual worked. The chief mysteriously died and Bishman ascended to the throne of the village. And honestly, this is where things started to feel wrong. The moment Bishman took control, darkness swallowed the village. He brought his own gang of brutal thugs, and together they terrorized the helpless locals. They lent money at impossible interest rates, stole the villagers' crops, beat anyone who resisted, and ran illegal businesses out of a filthy, run-down bar on the edge of town. Worst of all, they would lure innocent village girls to this bar under the pretense of giving them work, only to brutalize them. But in the midst of this living hell, there was a girl named Suzana. She was breathtakingly beautiful, the jewel of the village. Her father was the village school's headmaster. One afternoon, Suzana went to the school to bring her father his lunch. It was a normal day until she met a young man named Pranoja. Pranoja was new to the area, and he kindly helped Suzana start her malfunctioning scooter. In that brief moment, Suzana felt a deep, undeniable connection, but she was shy. Without saying a word, she left. Pranoja, meanwhile, had actually come to the village on a mission. He went straight to the local police station, looking for a man named Kasim. The police, entirely compromised by the village chief, simply handed him a form and told him that Bishman was out of town and he'd have to wait. That night, Suzana was lying in bed, completely unable to stop thinking about Pranoja. Her thoughts were interrupted when her father, the headmaster, called her into the drawing room. Sitting on the table was an expensive gift box. It was from Bishman. Bishman had been relentlessly sending marriage proposals to Suzana, but both Suzana and her father firmly rejected him. Bishman was an evil man, and on top of that, he was already married. But Suzana's mother didn't care. She was blinded by Bishman's immense wealth, constantly pressuring Suzana to accept, telling her she would never have to work another day in her life. Suzana was disgusted. She refused to marry anyone she didn't love. Right as they were having this heated argument, there was a loud knock at the door. Several villagers were there to see the headmaster. They were exhausted, terrified, and done with Bishman's reign. They wanted the headmaster to run for village chief. They believed he was the only one who could stand up to Bishman. And if he did, they promised to support him. The headmaster was terrified, knowing the retaliation it would bring. But Suzana, hearing this, felt a sudden surge of fear and a spark of rebellion. Bishman's thugs, lurking in the shadows outside, heard every single word. When Bishman found out that the headmaster was planning to file a police case to shut down his bar, he snapped. He couldn't allow this. He went back to the dark sorcerer, Saman. This time, Bishman brought a picture of the headmaster. Saman performed a chilling ritual, sacrificing a black rooster. In a horrifying display of devotion, Bishman drank the rooster's blood. The trap was set. Later that night, a fiery orb manifested and flew straight into Suzana's house. The headmaster jolted awake, screaming. Outside, the family cat lay dead in the yard, surrounded by unnatural flames. Suzana and her mother ran out of their rooms, following the sound of agonizing screams coming from the bathroom. They found the headmaster on the floor, pouring water over his body, which was burning from the inside out. His skin was splitting, blood oozing from the cracks. Suzana tried to run to him, but her mother grabbed her, holding her back. She knew instantly this was black magic. Someone had cast a dark spell on him. And right before their eyes, a massive, terrifying snake tore through the flesh of his stomach, emerging into the light. The headmaster took his final breath. The very next morning, Bishman was throwing a massive, joyous party at his house. His men were laughing, drinking, celebrating the death of the innocent man. But the celebration was cut short when a thug named Banteng approached Bishman. Banteng told him that his own wife, Suro, wasn't home. She had gone to Suzana's house to offer condolences. Bishman panicked. He knew that Suro knew the truth, that Bishman had killed the headmaster with black magic. If she told Suzana, everything would unravel. He immediately ordered his thugs to get to Suzana's house and bring Suro back at any cost. At the house, Suro was whispering the terrifying truth to Suzana. She was telling her that Bishman was the murderer. Before Suzana could even process the horror, Banteng and his thugs kicked down the door. Banteng, heavily intoxicated and aggressive, tried to drag Suro away. She refused. In a drug-fueled, mindless rage, Banteng grabbed a knife. A violent struggle broke out. Banteng, completely out of his mind, stabbed Suro. She bled to death right there on the floor. The other two thugs stood frozen, utterly shocked. But Banteng's high instantly faded into cold fear. He knew if Bishman found out he killed his wife, he was dead. But then, his eyes slowly drifted to Suzana. Suzana was the only witness. He lunged at her. Suzana sprinted out the back door, running for her life. 3 armed men chased her into the dense, dark forest. She ran until her lungs burned, until she hit the edge of a deep, fast-moving lake. She was trapped. Banteng approached her, a wicked grin on his face. He told her if she wanted to live, she had to jump into the water. Terrified of the men behind her and the dark water before her, she stepped backward and fell in. The moment she hit the water, a sharp, jagged piece of submerged wood pierced her back. She cried out in pain but managed to pull herself up, floating on a piece of debris. The current was strong, sweeping her away into the dark. The thugs returned to Bishman and lied. They told him Suzana had escaped after seeing Suro die. Bishman didn't care about his wife's death at all. He just ordered them to find Suzana. What Bishman didn't know, however, was that Suzana had survived. She was drifting unconscious in the water when Pronoja, who was meditating by the lake, spotted her. He pulled her from the water and rushed her to the hidden jungle home of his aunt Gayatri. Gayatri was a wise, perceptive woman. She immediately sensed that Suzana had severe internal injuries from the wood, alongside external cuts. She instructed Pronoja to treat the outside wounds while she treated the internal trauma. She pulled the jagged wood from Suzana's back. It took weeks of intense, careful treatment, but eventually, Suzana opened her eyes. She was shocked to see Pronoja. Slowly, Gayatri calmed her down and introduced themselves. Over the next 2 weeks, Pronoja took care of her. He cooked for her, tended to her needs, and watched over her. Gayatri could see the undeniable chemistry between them. They were falling in love. But peace was fleeting. One day, a desperate woman arrived at the house. She was holding a baby, crying. Her husband was beating her, threatening to take a second wife. She begged Gayatri to use black magic to destroy him. Pronoja, secretly listening from the shadows, was stunned. He went to a forbidden room in Gayatri's house, a room no one was allowed to enter. He broke the door open and froze. Inside were the terrifying tools of black magic. His own aunt was a dark sorceress. Pronoja was disgusted. He told her he was leaving, but as Pronoja stormed out, Gayatri walked into the room to find Suzana standing there. Suzana dropped to her knees. She didn't care about the sins. She begged Gayatri to teach her black magic. She wanted to take revenge on the men who destroyed her family and her life. Gayatri warned her. She told Suzana that stepping onto this path meant burning in the fires of hell, losing her faith, her soul. But Suzana's eyes were dead and cold. She told Gayatri she was already burning in hell. Gayatri agreed. She told Suzana that Pronoja could never learn this, but Suzana had a special dormant power inside her. To awaken it, Suzana had to fast for 7 days, no food, no sleep. Then she had to bathe in the ocean and finally retreat into a mountain cave to meditate for 40 days and 40 nights. During this time, the Jinn would try to torment her, but she could not break her meditation. And so, the agonizing 40 days passed. On the final night, a Jinn appeared. The Jinn looked exactly like Suzana. It pledged itself as her servant. A magical knife materialized in Suzana's hand. She had become the queen of black magic. While Suzana was mastering dark arts, Pronoja was still searching for his father. He confronted Bishman, showing him a picture of his mother and asking about a man named Kasem. Bishman looked at the photo and sneered. He told Pronoja that Kasem was a terrible man who had impregnated a village girl and was driven out of town. Bishman claimed Kasem was long dead. Pronoja, frustrated, stormed out. Shortly after, under the cover of night, Suzana returned to her village. She sneaked into her home, desperate to see her mother. but what she found broke her all over again. Her mother was frail, covered in brutal bruises. After Suzana had vanished, Bishman's men had tortured her, forced her into hard labor, and beat her relentlessly. She was dying. With her final breath, she made Suzana promise to bury her next to her father, and then she was gone. The next morning, at the graveyard, Suzana wept at her parents' fresh graves. Pranoja appeared, looking for his father's grave. He saw Suzana, told her he was staying at the local mosque, and offered his help if she needed it. Just then, Bishman arrived, playing the benevolent mourning leader. He went back to Suzana's house and once again offered his marriage proposal. This time, Suzana played a very dangerous game. She told Bishman she would marry him, but only if he proved his love. He had to find the sorcerer who killed her father, and he had to punish the 3 thugs who chased her, forced her to jump off a cliff, and caused her mother's death. Bishman was completely blindsided. Outside, the 3 thugs, Bantang and the others, heard everything. They knew Bishman would sacrifice them for Suzana. Bantang decided to kill Suzana once and for all. That night, Bantang broke into Suzana's house. As he searched the rooms, he stumbled upon a collection of terrifying black magic artifacts. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. From the garden, Suzana was controlling everything. She summoned a giant, venomous snake directly in front of Bantang. Bantang ran for his life. He jumped on his motorcycle, but the snake slithered onto his hand. He abandoned the bike, stole a random car from the street, and tried to speed away. Suzana intensified the spell. The snake slid into the car, creeping up his pant leg, and bit him. Bantang lost control. The car crashed violently into a tree. He crawled out, bleeding and broken, but still alive. As he lay on the ground, the car shifted, falling on top of him, pinning him completely. And if that wasn't enough, the car's engine caught fire. He barely managed to drag himself out from under the wreck before the entire vehicle exploded in a fiery blast. He rolled into a nearby garbage dump, putting out the flames on his body. The next morning, Bantang was a charred, agonizing mess in the hospital. Bishman came to visit him. Bantang begged Bishman to just kill him and end his suffering. Bishman, refusing to do his own dirty work, hesitated, but Bantang's pleas became unbearable. Finally, Bishman took a pillow, pressed it over Bantang's face, and suffocated him. When the other 2 thugs walked in and saw Bishman standing over their dead friend, they were horrified. They assumed Bishman killed him to get to Suzana. Bishman tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. Meanwhile, Pranoja visited Suzana, bringing her food. They talked, and Pranoja confessed he was taking Bishman's help to find his father. Suzana immediately panicked. She told Pranoja that Bishman was the man who murdered her parents. She warned him to stay away from Bishman. Pranoja wanted to help her fight, but Suzana refused. She wanted to fight her own war. She forced Pranoja to leave. The next day, the 2nd thug discovered from his wife that a strange woman had come to the house and taken a picture of him. The thug was terrified, correctly guessing Suzana was using black magic on him. And he was right. Suzana had already created a voodoo doll of him. Under the spell, the thug walked outside like a zombie. He began climbing a tall coconut tree. His wife watched, stunned, thinking he was just doing chores. But once he reached the very top, Suzana mentally pushed him. He fell from the massive height, shattering his body. He didn't die, but both of his legs had to be amputated. The only thug left, Lau, was furious. He blamed Bishman for everything, claiming Bishman had lost his mind over a girl and was killing his own friends. Lau gathered a mob and attacked Saman the sorcerer, believing Saman was behind the magic. They burned Saman's house, cut off the sorcerer's thumb, and burned him alive. When Lau went to the hospital the next morning, he found Bishman waiting there. Lau told him what happened. Bishman was furious. He hadn't used Saman to attack his friends. He was using Saman to find out who was casting the dark magic on them. Saman was his only source of protection. And right then, as if on cue, the 2nd thug, lying in his hospital bed, started violently convulsing. A snake slithered out of his ear, and he died instantly. Pranoja, who had gone to Bishman's office, was hiding outside and heard everything. Lau told Bishman they needed to spy on Suzana to figure out what was going on. Bishman ordered his men to watch her house. Pranoja, terrified for Suzana, sneaked to her house to warn her. He begged her to leave with him. Suzana refused. Instead, she took Pranoja into her secret magic room. Pranoja saw the dark artifacts and begged her to return to the path of God, warning her that she was losing her soul. Suzana, completely blind with rage, refused. Right then, there was a knock at the door. It was one of Bishman's spies. Suzana let him in. The man searched the house, walked into the magic room, saw the terrifying artifacts, and panicked. He pretended to see nothing and ran, but Suzana knew he knew. She instantly cast a spell on him. The spy ran back to his friends, terrified, telling them they had found the witch and needed to leave immediately. But when he tried to say Suzana's name, his voice failed him. He couldn't speak it. He couldn't even write it. Suzana's magic completely sealed his lips. Meanwhile, Pranoja had slipped out the back, but Lau's men were waiting. They hit him over the head, knocked him out, and dragged him to Bishman. While Pranoja was tied up at Bishman's club, Suzana, knowing Bishman was away, broke into Bishman's house. She found his personal magic knife and began casting a hex on it, using her own blood on a photo of him. Bishman returned to his house. He walked into his bedroom, completely unaware. Suzana, hiding in the room, unleashed the spell. Bishman was violently thrown across the room. The magic knife flew off the table and buried itself inside a wardrobe. The knife began to vibrate intensely. Suzana grabbed it, trying to hold on, but the dark energy was too powerful. She was lifted off the ground, thrown backward, and coughed up blood before falling unconscious. Bishman, recovering from the blast, heard the noise and found Suzana passed out in the room surrounded by black magic tools. He tied her up. When she woke up, he told her he didn't practice black magic himself, but he had protection spells. He told her to forget everything, accept his proposal, and be with him. Suzana looked him dead in the eye and said she would only marry him if he fulfilled her final condition. He had to kill one more person, Lau. Bishman, completely obsessed, agreed. He took Lau to another dark sorcerer, a man named Kudrat. Kudrat warned Bishman that this was a soul-altering spell, a memory wipe. Bishman didn't care. He wanted Suzana to forget everything and be a blank slate. The ritual was completed. Suzana woke up, her mind completely empty. She didn't even remember her own name. Bishman smiled, told her he would name her Suzana, and fed her with his own hands. One of Bishman's thugs, secretly watching from the shadows, was horrified to see his boss brainwashing an innocent woman. Bishman then went to Pranoja, who was still tied up. He taunted him, telling him he was marrying Suzana and that she was doing it willingly. Pranoja spat that she would never marry him. Bishman brought Suzana in front of Pranoja. Suzana looked at Pranoja with a blank, empty stare. She didn't recognize him. Pranoja's heart sank. He realized Bishman had used dark magic on her. That night, Pranoja, with the help of the secretly disgusted thug, sneaked into Bishman's house. They found Suzana sleeping in her room. Pranoja knocked her out and carried her away, driving her straight to Gayatri's house in the jungle. Gayatri took one look at Suzana and knew a memory wipe spell had been cast. Pranoja had to leave immediately, so Gayatri sat beside Suzana, waiting for her to wake up. When Suzana opened her eyes, Gayatri grabbed her head. An intense, supernatural battle erupted. Inside Suzana, the Jinn that Bishman's sorcerer Kudrat had sent was fighting against the environment. Kudrat, from afar, was chanting, giving the Jinn more power. The Jinn took control of Suzana, lifting Gayatri off the ground by her throat. Gayatri, choking, fought back, trying to press a magical paper onto Suzana's forehead. The Jinn threw Gayatri across the room, tearing the paper to shreds. Suzana's own loyal Jinn, the one she had summoned in the cave, was terrified of this new entity and refused to come near. Gayatri, bruised and bleeding, spotted a sharp piece of a broken pot. She cut her own hand, using her blood to draw a banishing spell on the shard. Suddenly, the clouds parted outside. The light of the full moon flooded the room, weakening the invading Jinn. Suzana lunged at Gayatri, but Gayatri seized the moment and drove the sharp, blood-marked shard into Suzana's body. Blood poured from Suzana's mouth. At that exact moment, far away, the voodoo doll Kudrat was using burst into flames. A small, magical knife fell from Suzana's lips. Suzana collapsed, unconscious but alive. The dark spirit was broken. The next morning, Bishman was furiously preparing for a forced marriage to Suzana, but no one could find her. He was enraged. Back at Gayatri's, Suzana woke up, her memories restored. But she was tormented. She knew Bishman had multiple protection spells around him. She couldn't reach him. Gayatri leaned in and whispered about a forbidden ultimate curse. It was a bloodline curse. If cast, it wouldn't just kill Bishman, it would destroy any future descendants he might have. Suzana paused. A dark smile crept across her face. Bishman had no children. He had no descendants. The curse would only take him. She agreed to learn it. Gayatri gave her a final, chilling warning. Once the bloodline curse was cast, it could never be reversed. If she tried to undo it, the Jinn would kill her instantly. Suzana accepted the price. Back in the village, Bishman was growing desperate. He ordered Lao to gather the villagers, offering a full pardon of their debts to whoever found Suzana. But as Lao addressed the crowd, a voice rang out. Pranoja stepped forward. He exposed Bishman's entire operation. He told the villagers how Bishman had destroyed their crops to force them into debt, stole their land, and made them slaves in their own homes. The villagers, finally pushed to the edge, erupted into a massive riot. Inside the building, Bishman's magical knife began to vibrate violently. He was panicking. Outside, his protective talisman spontaneously burst into flames. Bishman and Lao ran out the back, jumping into a car and speeding toward their fortified bar. The villagers, led by Pranoja, chased them down. The mob surrounded the bar, fighting Bishman's remaining thugs. Bishman and Lao were trapped inside. Lao tried to break open a drawer to grab a protective artifact, but the villagers smashed the windows and began pouring gasoline. They set the building ablaze. A burning piece of the ceiling fell, striking Lao on the head, knocking him out. Bishman didn't even hesitate. He stepped over his friend's body, stole the car keys from his pocket, and snuck out the back, abandoning his men to burn alive. Pranoja saw Bishman escaping and chased him on a motorcycle. As Bishman sped down the dirt road, Suzana, from her hidden location, began casting the bloodline curse. A terrifying apparition appeared in the middle of the road. Bishman swerved, crashing the car down a steep embankment. He survived, crawling out, bleeding. He thought he was lucky when he saw he hadn't been impaled by a sharpened tree branch that pierced the windshield. But Suzana wasn't done. She levitated into the air, her eyes completely black. She conjured 2 orbs of pure fire and hurled them directly at Bishman's car. The vehicle exploded in a massive fiery blast. Pranoja watched from the hill above as Bishman burned to death. The monster was dead. The scene shifted to the graveyard. Suzana and Pranoja stood by her parents' graves. Suzana was broken, convinced she was a sinner who could never return to the path of God. But Pranoja held her, telling her that God was merciful, that if she repented with a true heart, she would be forgiven. Suzana, loving him more than anything, agreed. They decided to dedicate the rest of their lives to God. But the nightmare wasn't over. 2 men approached them. They were Bishman's former office workers. They handed Pranoja a letter that Bishman had left behind before he died. Pranoja opened the envelope. Inside were 2 photographs. One was of his mother. The other was a wedding photo. But the man standing next to his mother in the wedding photo wasn't a stranger. It was Bishman. The letter explained everything. Bishman was Pranoja's father. He had married Pranoja's mother, lied to her, and abandoned her for another woman. He was a terrible, sinful man. But in the end, knowing Pranoja was his son, and seeing the good man he had become, Bishman felt a twisted sense of pride. That was why he left the letter. Pranoja stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. The man he had just helped kill, the monster he had hunted, was his own father. But Suzana's reaction was entirely different. Her blood ran cold. The bloodline curse. She hadn't just cursed Bishman. She had cursed his descendants. She had just placed a death sentence on Pranoja, the only man she loved, the man she was just about to spend her life with. And if you pay attention here, you'll realize the truth was hidden from the very beginning. She had sealed her own tragic fate the moment she cast that spell. Suzana didn't say a word. She turned and ran. Pranoja, confused, tried to follow, but she was too fast. Later that night, Pranoja went to Suzana's house. He knocked on the door. No answer. He pushed it open and stepped inside. As he walked down the hall, he approached the door to her magic room. He reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Suzana had locked it from the inside. Pranoja, panicking, broke the door down. He found Suzana lying on the floor, motionless. Her eyes were closed. A massive, gaping wound had torn open her stomach, killing her instantly. She had tried to reverse the bloodline curse to save Pranoja's life, knowing full well that doing so would cost her own. The Jinn had torn her apart the second she attempted to break the spell. Beside her lifeless hand lay a photograph of her parents. Pranoja fell to his knees, completely shattered. The woman he loved had sacrificed her own soul to save his life. Days later, the village had found peace. Pranoja gathered the villagers and told them the truth that Bishman was his father. He took the burden of his father's sins onto his own shoulders, and in an act of immense redemption, he donated every single piece of Bishman's stolen wealth back to the poor and suffering villagers. The village held democratic elections. Peace finally returned. In the final scene, Pranoja stood at Suzana's grave. He gently placed a framed picture of Suzana next to her parents' resting place. Even though the story ended, something about it still doesn't feel finished. The village was safe and Pranoja was alive, but the cost was a love that was never meant to be. And as the wind blew gently across the graveyard, Pranoja could almost feel her presence, standing right beside him. Because in the end, the real horror wasn't the dark magic they wielded. It was the inescapable bloodline of the curse, and the devastating price she paid to destroy the monster she never truly escaped.